I was bartending at a hotel in Phoenix when a German businessman ordered a Coke. I filled the glass with ice like we always do, then poured the Coke. He stared at it for a solid 10 seconds. Then he said, "Excuse me, I ordered a Coke, not ice with Coke flavoring." I explained that's how we serve drinks in America. He picked up the glass, examined it like a scientist studying a specimen, and said, "This is approximately 70% ice. In Germany, we have consumer protection laws against this." I told him it keeps the drink cold. He said, "We have refrigeration in Germany. We solved this problem in 1876. You're already seeing the kind of real-world anthropology I chase every week. Not surface-level culture jokes, but behavioral patterns hiding in plain sight. If you want more of these decoded moments, you know where to stay." He pulled out his phone and started calculating the cost per milliliter of actual Coke he was receiving. He showed me the math. He'd paid $4 for what he determined was 180 milliliters of Coke and 420 milliliters of frozen water. He asked if there was a regulatory agency he could report this to. I gave him a refill with less ice. He measured it with a ruler from his briefcase. Another German couple at a steakhouse in Texas spent 15 minutes negotiating ice levels with their server. They wanted European ice portions. The server had no idea what that meant. And that was just Tuesday. I work at a coffee shop in Miami Beach, and a German tourist ordered an iced latte. Standard procedure. I filled the cup with ice, added espresso and milk. She watched me make it through the glass partition. When I handed it to her, she said, "I think there's been a mistake. This is an ice cup with coffee." I explained, "That's an iced latte." She said, "No, an iced latte is a latte that is cold. This is ice that is latte flavored." She insisted I was using ice to cheat customers out of actual coffee. I told her this is how every coffee shop in America makes them. She said, "Every coffee shop is participating in the same scheme." She pulled up a picture of a German iced coffee on her phone. It was maybe 4 ice cubes floating in a full glass of coffee. She showed it to the other customers in line, pointing at my drink versus her photo like she was presenting evidence in court. She asked if anyone else was concerned about the ice-to-beverage ratio. One guy said, "Ma'am, that's just how it's served here." She said American consumer culture had normalized fraud. She ordered it with no ice. When I gave her room-temperature coffee with milk, she asked why it wasn't cold. I told her the ice is what makes it cold. She left a 1-star review about American ice cartels. I'm a server at a diner in New York, and a German family came in for breakfast. The dad ordered orange juice. I brought it filled with ice like normal. He called me back to the table and said, "I believe you forgot to add the juice." I said the juice is in there. He lifted the glass and tilted it, showing me how the liquid barely covered the ice. He said, "This is a glass of ice with orange decorations." His teenage son said, "Dad, maybe that's how they do it here." The dad said, "If this is how they do it, then America is running a sophisticated beverage scam." He asked me what percentage of the glass was actual juice. I said I don't really measure it like that. He said, "Approximately. 20%? 15%? I said maybe half and half. He did the math in his head and announced to his family that they were paying $8 for $4 worth of juice and $4 for tap water that had been frozen. His wife suggested just drinking it. He said he couldn't support this business model on principle. He asked if I could pour the juice into a separate glass and give him the ice on the side. I did that. He then complained the juice was warm. His son looked like he wanted to disappear. I managed a movie theater in Los Angeles, and we had a German exchange student working concessions. On his second day, an American customer ordered a large Sprite. The student filled it halfway with ice and the rest with Sprite. The customer said, "Can you fill it up?" The student said, "It is filled." The customer said, "No, it's half ice." The student said, "Yes, this is correct proportions." The customer said, "I need you to fill it with ice to the top, then add Sprite." The student stared at him. He said, "That is mostly ice." "You want to drink ice?" The customer said, "That's how it's supposed to be." The student said, "You are paying $6 to drink frozen water with soda taste." The customer said, "Just make it like normal." The student asked me if Americans genuinely preferred ice over actual beverage, or if this was a cost-cutting measure we enforced. This is exactly why I dig into stories like this. They look trivial, but they reveal entire cultural operating systems. If that kind of lens is your thing, join the people here who see the world differently. They're already subscribed. I told him to fill it with ice. He filled it with ice, poured Sprite until it overflowed the top, then looked at the customer like he was insane. The customer said, "Perfect." The student asked if he could write his economics thesis on American drink pricing psychology. He calculated we were selling ice for approximately $18 per kilogram. I drove a taxi in Las Vegas, and I picked up a German couple from the airport. It was 110 degrees outside. The wife asked for water. I gave her a bottle from my cooler. It was room temperature because the ice had melted. She opened it, took a sip, and asked if I had cold water. I said, "That's all I have." Her husband said, "In this heat, you don't keep ice in your taxi?" I explained the ice melts too fast in Vegas summer. He said, "In Germany, we have insulated containers. We have maintained cold beverages since the 1960s. He asked if there was a gas station nearby where he could buy ice. I said, "Sure, but we'd have to stop." He said, "That's fine." We stopped at a 7-Eleven. He bought a bag of ice and a large cup. He filled the cup entirely with ice, then poured maybe 3 ounces of water on top. His wife said, "That's too much ice." He said, "I'm integrating into American culture." She said, "You're drinking ice," he said. "When in Rome," she said, "We're in Las Vegas." The ice melted in about 4 minutes. He blamed American ice quality. He said German ice melts slower because of alpine water purity. I didn't respond. I worked at a pharmacy in Seattle, and a German woman asked where the refrigerated beverages were. I showed her the cooler. She opened it, picked up a Gatorade, and said, "This is not cold enough." I said, "It's refrigerated." She said, "It's cool, not cold." She asked what temperature the cooler was set to. I said, "I don't know exactly." She said, "In Germany, beverage coolers are 4 degrees Celsius. This feels like 12 degrees. She asked if she could add ice to it. I said, "We don't have ice for customers." She asked why a pharmacy doesn't provide ice for temperature regulation. I said, "We're a pharmacy, not a restaurant." She said, "You sell beverages but don't provide proper cooling?" She bought the Gatorade and asked if there was an ice machine in the building. I said maybe in the break room, but she can't access it. She asked if I could get her ice. I said I'm not supposed to leave the counter. She waited. She didn't say anything, just waited. Eventually, I got her a cup of ice from the back. She filled her Gatorade bottle halfway with ice and poured out half the Gatorade to make room. She left the spilled Gatorade on the counter. She said, "Now it's cold." She walked out. I cleaned up blue Gatorade for 5 minutes. I'm a flight attendant on international routes, and we had a German passenger on a flight from Munich to Chicago. Mid-flight, he asked for apple juice. I gave him a cup with ice and juice. He said, "May I have this without ice?" I said, "Of course," and I poured him a new cup with just juice. He took a sip and said, "This is warm." I explained that without ice, the juice is room temperature from the cart. He said, "Your cart isn't refrigerated?" I said it's insulated but not actively refrigerated. He said, "How do you keep beverages cold at altitude?" I said, "With ice." He looked at me like I'd just explained we navigate by the stars. He said, "So the ice is not optional. The ice is the refrigeration system." I said, "Basically, yes." He said, "In Germany, Lufthansa has temperature-controlled carts. The beverages are cold without ice." I said, "That's great." He said, "This is an engineering problem you've solved with frozen water." He asked if I could give him juice with just 2 ice cubes. I did that. He monitored the melting rate. He timed it with his watch. After 8 minutes, he announced the juice had reached optimal temperature. He asked me to note this ratio for future reference. I did not note this ratio. I worked at a gym in Boston. and a German member complained that our water fountain was too warm. He said he needed cold water after workouts. I told him to fill his bottle and add ice from the machine in the break room. He said, "You have ice, but your water isn't chilled?" I explained the fountain is plumbed to regular water. He said, "You have the technology to freeze water but not to cool the source?" I said the ice machine is separate. He said, "This is backwards engineering. You create cold by adding frozen water instead of cooling the water directly." He wrote a suggestion to management that we install a chilled water system like German gyms have. Management replied that we have an ice machine. He wrote back that this was an inefficient Cold War-era solution. He started bringing his own thermos with pre-chilled water from home. He told other members they were consuming thermally inadequate hydration. 2 people asked if the water was safe to drink. I was managing a restaurant in San Antonio, and we had a German tour group of 12 people. They all ordered various drinks. I watched our servers load up the glasses with ice like normal. Every single German at the table did the same thing simultaneously. They picked up their drinks, looked inside, and their faces went through identical expressions of confusion, then concern, then resignation. One woman said, "This is an American ice portion." Her friend said, "I was warned about this." Another guy said, "I read that Americans prefer ice to beverage, but I didn't believe it was true." They started comparing their glasses, measuring the ice levels against each other like they were conducting a scientific study. One man pulled out his phone and took a picture of his Coke. He said he was documenting this for his family who wouldn't believe him. His friend said, "They'll say you're exaggerating." He said, "I have photographic evidence." They asked their server if they could get refills with a reasonable ice amount, like perhaps 4 cubes. The server said she could do less ice. She brought them new drinks with maybe half the ice. They examined these like they were checking for defects. One woman said, "Better, but still aggressive." They debated whether this was about profit margins or if Americans genuinely couldn't taste beverages unless diluted with ice melt. They landed on profit margins. When the bill came, one guy calculated that roughly 30% of their beverage charges were for frozen water. He didn't complain. He just announced it to the table. Everyone nodded like this confirmed their suspicions. As they left, one woman said, "In Frankfurt, we have beverage regulations." Her husband said, "We're not in Frankfurt anymore." They say, travel broadens the mind. For Germans in America, it mostly broadens their understanding of ice-to-liquid ratios. If this kind of cultural dissection speaks to you, imagine having it queued up every week. No algorithms, no noise, just perspective. Subscribing doesn't help me. It helps you stay 3 moves ahead of the average traveler. And somewhere right now, another German is pulling out a calculator at an Applebee's, trying to determine the exact volume of Sprite they received versus the volume of ice they paid for. The server is smiling politely. The ice is melting.